let's throw out 3 or 4 very basic definitions of liberal arts and then talk about connections. There has been, since the origin of the liberal arts, an argument about whether or not the primary thing that we did was create knowledge or create citizens. And Socrates would have said we created knowledge, had the Socratic method, right? It's teaching people how to create knowledge by asking questions, never giving an answer, but asking questions, and people figured out how to create knowledge. Others, like Cicero, would have said, no, the primary thing that we're doing is creating individuals who can perpetuate a free society and make democracy work. And there's a great book, and I don't know if it's on my bookshelf or not, I should get you a copy of it. It's called Orators and Philosophers, right? Are we creating philosophers or are we creating orators, right? So if we believe there's primarily to create people to run a democracy, then it's orators. And if it's creating people or helping people create knowledge, that we're philosophers. And the historian who puts that book together and has that tension argues that the liberal arts have never been able to do both, right? It doesn't seem like we ought to be able to do both, teach people to create knowledge and teach people to be citizens, but his argument is that we've never really been very good at doing both, so for 100 years we do one and then the other. So anyway, I think that the connection between MOOCs and liberal arts might depend upon whether or not you're an orator or a philosopher. And then more recently there's been this kind of pragmatic approach that's used by American liberal arts colleges or U.S. liberal arts colleges in the last 30 years of the 20th century, which basically said a liberal arts education is that collection of teaching methods that works best. Now isn't that a great definition? Because then you can actually be certain that liberal arts is the best form of education because you defined it as the collection of the best practices in education. But so throwing all of those together, what's the connection to a MOOC? I think you would say that in any of those, and we'll throw in yours of saying it's learning to integrate knowledge. In any of those, what you need as a basic building block is knowledge or facts or ideas or theories that you can use to connect. You can't think about connecting knowledge if you don't have some knowledge to connect. You can't talk about the intersection of physics and literature if you don't know the second law of thermodynamics. And now, and we might say, well, you ought to learn how to invent the second law of thermodynamics. And I guess you could if you could live for 100 years and you had working with you the 10 brightest people you could find, right? Because it took 100 years of really bright people to come up with the laws of thermodynamics. It was beautiful 100 years, but so no one person is going to be able to do that. So you probably aren't going to be able to do that on your own. You need somehow to come up with someone just to tell you what the second law of thermodynamics was, so that you can think about how to connect to the literature. And so that basic building block to work on, facts and theories, are the kind of things that I think we transmit well in a book or a lecture. And some people probably are going to pick up that basic idea in a book well, and others are going to say, you know, I don't think that's enough. I'd like to go to a lecture and hear those. And for those who like to go to a lecture and hear that, then a MOOC is a great thing for giving you the building blocks or the pieces to use in a liberal arts education. So they're a great supporter of a liberal arts education. MOOCs free us up to do the really fun stuff of liberal arts education. Now that begs the question of if you're really, really good at a MOOC, could you do the liberal arts part of it as well? And I don't know the answer to that. You could do it in a book too, right? But so far people haven't really figured out how to get books to replace professors. And isn't a MOOC a lot like a book, right? I mean, it's a way for someone to transmit a lot of information to a very large audience. The first MOOC someone told me about in great detail was the MOOC on the U.S. Constitution taught at Hillsdale College. And I think you can probably take it free, right? I mean, that's what they mean, massive online open courses. And I think there's 13 or 14 lectures, and there are 500,000 or 600,000 people perhaps taking that course. And Hillsdale College, I think we call itself a liberal arts college. And some people might argue that they're not, depending on the definition of liberal arts college, but I think they would think they were. And their specialty is democracy, constitution. They come out from a rather conservative side, but the Constitution is the thing that they talk about all the time. And so to them, perfectly logical that if they did a MOOC, if they did one MOOC, they would do it on the Constitution. And so if you believed that the most important thing that liberal arts colleges do is create citizens in a democratic society, then one of the most important things you could do in MOOC is to really understand the Constitution. Now, again, that might not prepare you to have really difficult conversations with classmates about the Constitution and do it in a civil way, and to do it without yelling at each other, and to have this wonderful concept of sympathetic imagination when you argued with each other. You might not have learned to do that, but you certainly learned content that wasn't just general content, but that was absolutely essential to the conversations that you wanted to have happen in liberal arts college. So you might say that all MOOC is really doing is taking a content area that is essential to the liberal arts, but not necessarily completely the liberal arts, and do a MOOC on that. Now, but then you go more broadly and say, could you do some of the things in a MOOC that we uniquely do in a liberal arts conversation? And when I ask freshmen in ILA what they're learning in Introduction to Liberal Arts, they say, well, we're learning how to learn from our classmates, even if we disagree with them initially. Now, I suppose you could design a MOOC where at some point you stop the conversation or stop the presentation by the specialist on the Constitution and have a conversation. Now, you couldn't have that conversation with all 600,000 people. They don't all take it at the same time. But could it be set up so that it automatically grouped you into groups of 20 students, and it knew your demographics, and so it put people of very different racial, ethnic background, different economic backgrounds, different ages together, and had a conversation? I think it could. Would you then have to have some people to facilitate that? Because I think that one of the things professors do in those conversations at some point is help you learn how to have a civil conversation and critique the conversation and keep things online and keep someone from dominating it. And so maybe you would have to have MOOCs that had teaching assistants along the ways. But you could do things like that. You could figure out how to do them. The thing that seemed to me to be most challenging in a liberal arts environment, and maybe MOOCs could get there, is that your professor knows a lot of things about you uniquely, because you came by and had an office conversation, and she saw that you were in a play last week, and she knows that you're on the basketball team. She knows all the things about you, so that when you're having the conversation, she can help you connect a new idea to something you already know about. Now, can the computer do that? I suppose. It could. At some point, then, is the MOOC no longer the massive online thing, and has it become personalized for you and a few individuals? And are you what you're really doing is programming the computer to break you down into small groups and try to run a discussion section in that? But one should never argue that MOOCs are bad because they can't do X, Y, or Z, because someone can program them to do X, Y, or Z, I think. To me, the analogy is a textbook, right? So when textbooks were generated, people might have said, liberal arts college is going to be out of business, because why would we pay Professor Draxler to teach a course when you could get a textbook from someone at University of Illinois and read all of those things in the book. That will put her out of business, but in fact it didn't put her out of business. What she did was to say, why don't you buy the book and I'm going to have you read an hour's worth of that textbook before class so that when we come in, I don't have to spend time rehashing that. I can assume you already know that and we can build on that. It assumes you've already read the textbook. But she used it to assist the course, not to replace the course, and it wasn't something that you did before you started the course or after you started. It's something you did all the way through, and so, I mean, most of the MOOCs you're talking about are physics courses and engineering courses. And I taught physics and engineering, and again, I could imagine having a class, having my 50-minute class in which everyone had already heard my lecture. Now, maybe because I created the MOOC and the lecture and take, or maybe because I said, you know, there's someone at MIT that can give that lecture just as good as I. But what that professor at MIT can't do is look in your eye and realize that you didn't understand that and say, well, I know 3 different ways to explain it, and I tried the second, and it didn't work, and the third, and then I saw your eyes click, oh yeah, I got that. Or that I know the person beside you understood and you didn't, or I know what you understood from 3 weeks ago, and I can use that analogy to pull into that. And so I can personalize it to everyone in the classroom because I don't have to spend the 50 minutes doing the lecture material, even the homework problems, and I can do the face-to-face, one-on-one learning. And when you realize it, I can say, now, isn't that significant? And think of how that relates to what's going on in your calculus course, and because I know what calculus course that you're taking. And so to me, its ideal place is completely merged with the course in the same way that a textbook is merged with